So, welcome to the presentation about protecting your grandchildren from job search scams. I'm Alice Diamond, and I'm privileged to be a volunteer with AARP Massachusetts. And in my volunteer role, I do two things. One is talks like this, where we talk about protecting yourself from fraud and identity theft to community groups. And I also am a volunteer on the Fraud Watch helpline. So every week, I call back people who have been victimized by scammers and give them resources and support. So today we're going to talk about what you can do to protect your grandchildren from job search scams. And let me also mention that many people in our age range are also looking for possibly part-time work or gig work or contract work. So everything that I'm talking about is also relevant to anybody who's thinking about doing almost anything to bring in some income. The Fraud Watch Network is a great resource, and I will tell you more about the resources available through Fraud Watch Network later in the presentation. So one of the things that's helpful to know is that the goal of the fraud criminal basically is either to gain your confidence to get your money, or to get your personal information, or in some cases, to do both. And, you see that we use the phrase fraud criminal. We no longer say con artist because really there's nothing very artistic about what these folks are doing. So we're going to talk today about how to avoid being victimized, the really important role that grandparents can play, how to spot job and income scams, protecting yourself and loved ones, using LinkedIn and AARP resources. One of the things that's really helpful to know is that research has shown that if you know about a specific scam, you're 80% less likely to engage with the scammer. And if you do engage, you're 40% less likely to be victimized. So awareness, information, and education is really essential. And I can tell you, in my work on the Fraud Watch Network hotline, I call back a lot of people who seem pretty together, fairly savvy, and many of them know about scams. They just didn't know about the specific scam for which they were targeted. So that's why we do talks like this, to try to increase awareness. This is really interesting for you to know. When asked whom they trust the most, teens and 20-somethings say their parents and grandparents. So as a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a trusted friend, you are in a unique place to help guide young people through the treacherous landscape of modern fraud. And honestly, we want to bring up the topic of fraud because if we never talk about it, we can be part of the problem. I just want to mention one more thing, which is that while seniors lose the most money in scams, young people are targeted much more frequently. So that's a helpful thing to know. Okay, so let's get right into the tactics used by scammers. They manipulate us into becoming emotional. When scammers are interviewed about how were you successful, and they talk about it, they say, we get you under the ether. What is the ether? It's an often temporary state of heightened emotions. So some of the scams, respond now or risk jail. We've kidnapped your grandchild or your child or your niece or your nephew. you get that really scary message on your computer that with a terrible sound that sounds like your computer is melting down. The other thing is the emotions don't have to be negative ones. So one of the reasons that the lottery and sweepstakes scams are so effective is because we get excited. And honestly, when we're excited, we're also more vulnerable to getting under the ether. It's one of the reasons why job search scams are so effective. You've been job searching for a while. You hear from a prospective employer that they want to bring you in for an interview. Of course, you're excited, you're happy. And one thing to know about getting under the ether, this doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in this heightened emotional state for a day, an hour. It can be a split second. So scammers prey on our emotional vulnerability and our fears. Okay. So this chart, if you look at the top line, the yellow line, it shows over the last 4 years the increase in job scams and employment agency scams. So basically all kinds of scams related to job searching. And I can tell you, having run a university career center, that it's an epidemic. I also want to add that it's a very unknown epidemic because, as you can imagine, I talk about scams a lot. And when I'm out with friends and, what's going on, I might say, oh, I'm doing a talk about job search scams for the Age Strong group in Boston. Oh, really? I never heard of that. I mean, honestly, most people have never heard of job search scams. It's one of the reasons why they're so effective, because the scammers are really hoping that it will never occur to you that it's a scam. Okay, so let's get into the details. One thing is that there are some job titles that are more likely than not to be a scam. And I'm going to start with mystery shopper. I mean, for anyone who likes to shop, this sounds like a great job. In case you don't know what the job is, it basically involves going to a retail store, interacting with customer service, and writing up a report about the quality of your experience. And it's a great scam job because they're sending you money. You're probably sending back receipts for things. Maybe they want to send you stuff to be direct deposited. So I'm basically going to tell everybody, I'm not saying there are no legitimate mystery shopper jobs, but the vast majority of the postings probably are scams. So just be really, really cautious. Not only are you not going to find a job, you're going to find a big hassle. Okay. Even more frequent than mystery shopper is the posting of personal assistant. And I can tell you, in my university career center, we got so many of these that we actually had a policy that I, as the associate dean or my senior associate director, had to personally approve any personal assistant job postings. And let me tell you, the number of them that were legit was very small. And often they say, personal assistant, flexible hours, $25, $35 a week. It just, an hour, it makes it sound like this incredible job. Unfortunately, caregiver is another one where we see a lot of scams, and it's especially heartbreaking because if there's ever a time that you're probably stressed and, in a situation where you might be more vulnerable, you're looking for childcare, you're looking for senior care, whatever it is, care for someone with special needs. And the scammers depend on this because, again, they're probably aware that you may be easier to get under the ether. Whenever you see anything like this, work from home and earn a 6-figure salary, it sounds too good to be true. It's most likely not true. Government job scams are another really common one. You may see postings for post office jobs or fees to get jobs. So just be really, really, really cautious about those. We also see scams related to all kinds of training to start your own business. And these take many forms. You may be paying some hard-earned money for business leads that turn out to be completely useless. So you want to be really, really cautious about that. And there's so many more. I'm just going to share a couple more examples. So work from home, earn 500 to 1,000 per week guaranteed, great paying jobs. Be very cautious. You don't ever want to pay for job listings. Job placement services where they're guaranteeing you a job that you have to pay for placement, be very cautious. And this one on the right, it came up actually on my Facebook feed. $980 to put candy in boxes? Really? No, not really. Let me also mention while we're at it, the number of scams on social media is incredible. So what I'm talking about is fake products, fake businesses. So just be really, really cautious in general when you're on social media. And unfortunately, even job postings that really look legitimate can be scams. That's one of the reasons why this is such a gold mine for scammers. So, scam jobs, unfortunately, are everywhere that you see legitimate jobs. So LinkedIn, Indeed. You may even get an email from a trusted friend forwarded to you in your personal Gmail account. They know you're looking for a job as an ABC, and they see a job for that, and they forward it to you. And you trust your friend, so you click on it. Well, first of all, be aware that your friend may not have clicked into the posting, so they don't know whether it's legit or not. And they might have meant well. It's also possible that it's actually not really coming from your friend. So you want to be very cautious whenever you're online looking at postings, and I'm going to give you a couple things to look for. But don't assume just because it's on LinkedIn or just because it's on Facebook that it's on the up and up. And I mentioned to you the email, even forwarded to you from a trusted friend. By the way, whenever you get something from a trusted friend, whatever it is, information about a government grant, I'm a great believer, pick up the phone and actually call your friend. I can't tell you how many people I've called on the Fraud Watch network that got some kind of Facebook message or message on Messenger about some great opportunity. If they had just picked up the phone and called their friend, they would have found out it was spoofed, which means it wasn't actually from that person. Okay, so other places where we can see scam postings: local papers, the media, flyers on telephone poles, and most unfortunately, everywhere else. Okay, so now let's talk about what are some of the things you want to look for in terms of trying to spot potential scams. Okay, paying for job listings or application fees. That is a major red flag. A very big salary for simple work. I said this before, but I'm going to repeat myself. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Okay, the next one is a huge one. Any reason that you get paid before you work. Now, most of us know the way it works in the world is most of the time, first we work, then we get paid. Now, you might say, well, why would anyone pay me before I work? Let me give you a couple of examples. You're up and back in correspondence with the person that's going to be your new boss. This goes on for weeks. And then they say, oh, could you just download some software for the new job? We're having some issues with our accounting department right now. Would you mind to purchase it? We're going to send you a check for it, and then you'll be reimbursed. Great, you said. You want a good relationship with your new boss. Well, guess what? The check that comes is for too much. The software that you downloaded was $100 and the check is for $500. You deposit the check. It looks like it cleared. You find out about 10 days after it cleared that it didn't actually clear, and you're out $400. And then you're also probably out the $100 because whatever you downloaded was also probably a scam. You want to avoid paying fees to the employer or recruiting agency. Major red flag. You get a job offer without an interview. The interview was very short, or worst of all, the interview was conducted via chat. Now, to us, especially for those that are, close in age to me, the idea of a chat interview, chat, chatting on your, using text message kind of chatting, is ridiculous. But we know young people are living their entire lives on their phone, and they may not realize that might be a good way to, chat and communicate with, with a quick message. But you need to let them know that if they didn't get an interview, that there's a chance it's a scam. And basically anything that sounds too good to be true. Okay. So what are some of the things you can do to protect yourself? Remember that scammers take advantage of our emotions, both positive and negative. And it's a natural part of life to feel emotions. And in these days of the proliferation of scams, everybody just needs to slow down and think. When you hear about a job you applied for, it's very exciting. And as I mentioned, we're all more vulnerable when we have heightened emotions. It doesn't mean also that you completely lose your wits. It can just be a split second where you say, oh my gosh, I got an interview. You click on a link to respond, and the next thing you know, all kinds of crazy things start happening. Okay. Be especially cautious if an employer is using a personal email like Gmail, Yahoo, or AOL to communicate about a job. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not some legitimate businesses that might be using these accounts, but the convention is usually a business email. So just if you see an email address, and I'm going to tell everybody, any email communication you have related to a job, look at the email address. I'm going to tell you, for the scams that came into our office, if we had, in the beginning when we were trying to figure this out, we weren't doing that very carefully. And I quickly learned, if I look at the email address, it's a good place to see that something's not quite right. Like they say the name of the company is ABC, but the email address says ABD or something like that. Also notice if there are misspellings or errors in the posting or the email address or the company information. That is another red flag that something might be amiss. So again, look carefully at the sender email address of anyone who contacts you about a job opening. And these are the usual conventions. So if it's a business, it's going to be the name of the company.com. If it's a school or college or some educational organization, it's going to be .edu, and a nonprofit should be .org. Be especially cautious, by the way, if someone says they're an outside recruiter representing the organization. I'm not saying there aren't any legitimate outside recruiters, because there are, but it's one of the easiest ways for scammers to convince people, well, that's why I'm recruiting for Microsoft. But the reason I don't have a Microsoft email address is that I'm an outside recruiter. Yeah, maybe you are, but there's a good chance you aren't. Okay, some simple things you can do. I can't tell you how many scam job postings I quickly figured out were not legit by just looking at the physical address in the posting and looking on Google Maps. I mean, obviously, this is not a very sophisticated investigation technique, but many times I would see a personal residence where a corporation was supposed to be, or an empty lot where a business was supposed to be. So it's a simple thing to do. And be especially cautious if everything is remote. And what I mean by that is the job is remote, the interview, everything's happening remotely. Because I believe that there are businesses that are set up now with web designers and graphic designers and user experience experts who are creating fake everything. So the person that you see that you think is, standing in front of the Amazon logo, it could be completely fake. Okay, a couple more things. This is pretty simple. Pretty much people are now leaving their street address off their resume, so that's a good thing to do. I'm going to tell you pretty much, don't post your resume on job boards. I know people tell you networking is important, but it's almost a guarantee. From my work as a career coach, I can tell you the chance of you getting a legitimate job is so much more than the chance of you getting all kinds of outreach for things you're not interested in, as well as opening yourself up to scams. Overshare on social media. This is a thing that it's a really good idea to have a conversation with the young people in your life, nieces, nephews, children, grandchildren. Often people overshare on social media, and the scammers are very good at picking up all kinds of information and using it. So just be really cautious about that. Okay. When you're contacted about an interview, do research on the organization. The other thing is keep records of what you applied for. So tell the young people in your life, if you're applying for jobs and you're not keeping track of it, many people that I've worked with were scammed. Once they figured out what was going on, they realized they had never even applied for a job at the company. So keep really good records. And a little tip about this from a career coach, what many people do when they apply for a job is they keep the hot link that they applied for. That's not enough. Take a screenshot of that posting, name it, and put it in a file somewhere. Because what happens much of the time is by the time you're contacted for an interview, the hot link has gone cold. And what happens, this is for legitimate jobs, you're about to get interviewed for a job and you have no idea what the job is. So it's helpful for legitimate jobs, but it's especially helpful for protecting yourself from scams. Okay. If I had a dime for every call that I make on the Fraud Watch helpline where people say, well, I did a Google search. Part of our training for working on the Fraud Watch helpline was training with Jim Browning, who is an incredible scam buster. If you want to watch some of his videos, he's an incredible person, and it was a real privilege to be trained by him. He did a Google search for Norton antivirus, which is software that protects your computer. I'm going to tell you at least 40% of the links that came up were scams. So just because you do a Google search, I mean, with all due respect, I know Google has a fraud team. I'm sure they're working very hard and they're doing what they can do. But let me tell you, the number of Google searches that come up to scam websites is huge. Be very, very cautious if an organization claims to be an employment agency that's pre-screening for a company. And this is kind of a low-tech thing. You can actually call an organization to verify that the person who contacted you about the job actually works there. I know it's kind of a throwback, but you get a call from ABC company that this person wants to interview you. And if you just pick up the phone and say, I was called by so-and-so, does this person work there? That sometimes is a simple way to discover that you're about to avoid a scam, hopefully. Okay, a couple more tips for protecting yourself. Sometimes people say, well, they asked me for my driver's license. They asked me for my social security number. Well, guess what? Leave it blank. You do not want to give any personal information. So this means social security number, birth date, bank account information. Now, one of the things is that, you want a job and you want to be cooperative, and they may say, well, we need your bank account information because after you're hired, we're going to do direct deposit. Just hold off on the bank account information. Well, what I'm going to say is, regardless of what you're working for, tell your young people in your life, get an old-fashioned hard copy check for your first check or two. And that has to do with any organization, not just ones that you're worried about whether it's a scam. I mentioned this early. Be especially cautious if all the interviews happen virtually. And if you get a job offer, so this is the time to stop, think. You must independently verify that the person offering you the job really works at the company. Now, some of these scam job offers are really easy to tell because they're filled with weird language and misspellings, but I've also seen some that really, really looked legit. And one of the reasons I got into this work is one of the smartest students I know at my school, who was admitted to some very competitive schools and came to mine, was scammed. And it wasn't because she wasn't smart. It wasn't because she was gullible. It was because the scammer was so sophisticated. So the job offer is a really critical moment to stop and be sure that it's a legitimate job. And if you get a written offer, review it carefully. And this is a great time to just share it with a trusted and wise friend. It doesn't mean you call up your friend and say, I got a job offer. I don't know what to do. This is what happened. I got an offer. Can I just run it past you for a second opinion? We've stopped so many scams because when I worked at my university, pretty much every time I got in front of students, regardless of what I was there to talk about, resumes, interviewing, job searching, networking, I started by talking about job search scams. And I was at this school for many, many years. So, thousands of students probably heard me give this talk. And I would always say, if you get a job offer, don't hesitate to run it past me. And the number of students and also alums who would get back in touch with me, and we headed off so many problems at the pass because so you may not have a career coach you can run it past, but run it past a trusted and wise friend. Okay. And this is the moment of, do not give personal information unless you're positive it's a legitimate job offer. Never give out your credit card or bank information. And again, you might think, well, why would an employer ask for my credit card? Believe me, they have some very clever and sophisticated techniques. You think you're talking to your boss, and all kinds of things happen. The bank information, again, you're going to wait, get a couple of paper checks. If you get a payment before you start working, that's a great moment to go, what is going on here? Because often it's part of the fake check scheme where they're going to send you a check. Oh, sorry, it was for too much, and ask you to send the money back. And later on, you find out that the check is not good. Don't cash a check from anyone that you haven't verified. And then yet more about the fake check scam. And a lot of times when people fall for the fake check scam, it's because they didn't understand that when the banking regulations require that within about 2 days, your bank statement has to show that the check cleared. But what you might not know is it actually can take up to 2 weeks and even longer for the check to actually clear. So if you put the check in and then it bounces 10 days later, you're going to be responsible for that money. And if you've already sent money to somebody, you're going to be out the money. Okay. One of the reasons job search scams are so effective in terms of stealing identity is that you have to give personal information for the W-4 form or an I-9 form. So what's the personal information? They need your social security number. And every legitimate employer is going to need, you can't put someone on a payroll without their social security number. So that's why you want to be really positive that, you know, your home address, social security number, they may ask for a copy of your driver's license or passport. You may be asked for bank information. Again, I'm going to repeat my tip. Wait until the second or third paycheck for direct deposit. For those of you that don't work with checks, they still work and they can be very effective. And one of the things I can tell you is that the reason that criminals want to get your identity is that they can then, once someone has your social security number, they can take a loan out in your name. They can take a cell phone out. They can get a credit card. I had a friend who applied for unemployment, and when she went to apply, she was told, "Oh, you're already on unemployment." Well, she wasn't on unemployment, but somebody had taken her social security number and applied for unemployment. And the worst of this is that people, not only don't they get a job, they need to keep job searching, but they end up with a whole financial mess. And I can tell you, it's a lot of work to clean this up. This isn't like you just make one phone call and you're all set. There's many steps of things you have to do. And it's also stressful. Okay. So a couple quick things about LinkedIn. If people are not on LinkedIn, I think it's a great job search resource. I recommend it. I use it a lot. I am going to point out that there are privacy settings. So you can see the picture of my little profile there. You can go under it and click settings and privacy and set it so that only those with first-degree connections can see your email address. So what that means is the only people who can see my personal email address are those with whom I've connected. Also, my whole name is on LinkedIn, but you can also set your profile to just show your first name and initial of your last name. And that's another option. And then most important, and this is true for all social media, be very cautious about who you accept as connections. And I know that, we're all supposed to network and you may be reached out by recruiters, but as soon as someone has your email address, you could be vulnerable to all kinds of contacts. So if somebody just sends you a connection, a request to connect with no note, and you don't know who they are, I'm going to tell you, don't accept them. Now, maybe you go look them up online and see who they are. But even if someone sends you a personal note, because the connection requests can either come, they can either come with no note or with a note. But just because there's a note doesn't necessarily mean that you want to connect with the person. Okay, a couple more things about using LinkedIn. Check use it to verify the identity of somebody who connected with you, and be aware there are fake LinkedIn profiles, and scammers have impersonated real people on LinkedIn. And I've had scams like that. I had a student who got a job offer as a graphic designer from, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but let's just call it the ABC company. And she just ran the job offer past me because she remembered me speaking about job search scams. She just wanted to be careful. Everything looked really legit. We looked up the people on LinkedIn. She told me who she interviewed with. And then I just said to her, tell me about the interviewing process. How did it go? She said, oh, it went really well, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, when did they review your portfolio? She said, they never looked at my portfolio. Wait, in my 4 decades as a career coach, never have I seen anyone hired for a graphic design position without a review of their portfolio. Well, it turned out that all the people and all the names were real, but someone was impersonating them. The whole thing was fake. And I did reach out to the legitimate person at the legitimate company to let her know that someone was impersonating her. And you can block anyone on LinkedIn from the drop-down menu at the top of your profile summary. Okay, so to the Fraud Watch Network, this is the phone number for the helpline. It's 877-908-3360. And calls are answered from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. It's free to everyone. You do not have to be an AARP member. You can use it to report a scam. You can get help figuring out if something is legit or not. You can get help if you or a loved one has experienced a scam. And I can tell you that I've talked to people from their teens through their 90s. So it is a great, great resource. And what happens when you call in is that you'll speak to a call center representative who will get some basic information about your situation. And then you'll be called back, usually within 24 hours, at most about 48 hours, by a trained volunteer fraud specialist who will help you with resources and next steps. You won't have to go through telling your story multiple times. You'll just tell the call center person enough information so that when the fraud specialist volunteer calls you back, they'll have some information about what happened to you. This is information about the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center. The website is wwic3.gov/complaint. And then it's a great idea to sign up for the Fraud Watch Alert. You can send a text to 50757, and alerts are sent out every other week about new scams. And believe me, there's a new scam a minute. So it's great to hear about the latest ones. And also, I am going to really recommend everyone listen to the Perfect Scam podcast. It's put on by AARP, and there's probably no better way to learn about the variety and the experiences of people who have been scammed. And finally, here is the AARP Fraud Watch Network website. It is a wealth of information, and I really want to encourage people to learn more about scams. And also, when you're with friends and family, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, bring up the topic about scams. Have a conversation, because part of what scammers hope is that we won't think about it. We won't talk about it until the phone rings and find out, oh, guess what? You won Publishers Clearinghouse, which is one of the most common scams, actually. So have a conversation, because really, I think the key is empowering yourself and empowering others. So thanks for so much for watching this tape. And we hope that you will take advantage of the resources of the Fraud Watch Network. Bye-bye.